Amidst the chaos of the 7-day elemental wars, a hellish nightmare straight out of Game of Thrones that wiped out 3/4 of humanity, an orphaned child was found crawling through the battlefield, barely clinging to life. He was rescued before starvation could finish what the war started, but his mind was shattered, and he couldn't even remember his own damn name. The kid was broken, a shell of a human. But two girls, Lydia, a blonde badass with the demeanor of Daenerys Targaryen, and Carol, a pink-haired hothead who could give Harley Quinn a run for her money, took him under their wing. They treated him like he was their own kid, painstakingly teaching him to speak again. When he finally muttered the word Ray, Lydia realized it was his name. Ray, she repeated with a sly grin, making him echo it like it was some Stranger Things moment. But when Carol eagerly asked him to say her name, he smirked and called her dumb pink, causing Lydia to burst into laughter. The little dude knew exactly how to handle this walking chaos. For the first time since he got there, Ray smiled, an actual, genuine smile. Even so, Lydia knew their fleeting peace was a joke. The generals, heartless sons of bitches who'd make Breaking Bad's Gus Fring seem like a saint, weren't going to let a kid live among soldiers. When Carol found out, she went full-on Kardashian drama, screaming that she could feed Ray, take him on walks, and basically be his personal babysitter. But when they turned to Lydia for her opinion, she was dead silent. Her icy stare said it all. She knew their time together was running out. But then Ray, this broken, war-torn kid, looked at them like he was standing on the damn American Idol stage and was asked to choose his future. What would he do? That answer was going to change everything. She saw Ray hovering nearby, eavesdropping like some kid caught in the middle of a Grey's Anatomy meltdown. Lydia turned to him, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Decide your own damn future," she said bluntly, locking her piercing gaze on him. For a moment, Ray just stood there, but then he stepped forward, grabbed her hand, and said with trembling conviction, "I want to stay by your side." Those words hit her like a scene out of The Walking Dead, unexpected and raw. Without hesitation, Lydia took him under her wing, naming him her apprentice and transferring her legendary ice blade sorcerer divinity to him. Over the next 6 years, the military milked his broken powers dry, using him to obliterate entire battlefields like some twisted X-Men experiment. Meanwhile, Howard, a grizzled veteran with the warmth of a grumpy but loyal sitcom dad, trained Ray relentlessly, shaping him into the coldest, most ruthless super soldier in the world. Howard even swore on his life that he'd protect Ray no matter what. But promises like that don't mean jack in a war zone. During the final battle, Howard was gunned down right in front of Ray, his body collapsing like a heartbreaking scene from The Last of Us. The trauma hit Ray like a freight train, reopening the wounds of a broken past. But the horror didn't stop there. When Ray turned, he saw Lydia lying lifeless on the ground, her usual strength gone. That was the breaking point. His dormant ice god powers erupted in a blinding flash, activating the forbidden overheat spell. A colossal ice dome engulfed the entire battlefield, freezing everything in its path with the vengeance of an unhinged Avengers Endgame finale. Though Lydia was only paralyzed, not dead, Ray was shattered. That night, he knelt at Howard's grave under the cold moonlight, swearing with a voice that could have carried through Game of Thrones, for as long as he lived, he'd never forget the man who gave him purpose. A decade later, his name was legend, a walking nightmare to his enemies, but to those who knew him, he was the embodiment of loyalty forged in ice and blood. On his first day at Arnold Academy, Ray found himself saving some useless girl with massive tits from falling. "Sorry, it's my first day," he mumbled, trying to move on. But when she realized he was the ordinary transfer student, she screamed in disgust and passed out like she'd touched a plague victim. Things got worse when some guy, looking strung out like he'd walked off Breaking Bad, lunged at Ray, ready to throw a punch for the crime of being ordinary. Before Ray could swing back, a sharp voice yelled, "Stop." It was Amelia Rose, the daughter of one of the 3 top noble families. She shut the guy down with a glare and then turned to Ray. "Congratulations," she said smugly. "You're the first ordinary to attend this academy. I'll protect you." Her words sounded nice, but Ray knew better than to trust a noble's charity. In class, Al, junkie vibes and all, kept glaring at Ray, furious about having an ordinary among them. But Ray was too distracted, his mind spiraling with flashbacks from the war. That didn't last long, though, because Miss Gray hurled a piece of chalk at his face, exploding like a cheap magic bomb. "Pay attention," she barked. She went on to explain the sorcerer hierarchy. 5 classes, 7 grand sorcerers, and at the top, the Ice Blade Sorcerer. This legendary figure had vanished after wiping out the entire eastern continent. Ray stayed quiet, but deep down, the mention of that name brought back memories he wasn't ready to face. As Miss Gray continued her lecture, Al glared at Ray, silently seething. Why is a disgusting ordinary even here? He muttered under his breath, furious that someone like Ray could even dream of becoming a grand sorcerer. The rest of the class seemed to agree, their judgmental stares making it clear. But Miss Gray wasn't having it. She slammed her desk and yelled, "Only those who pass the entrance exam are allowed here, regardless of nobility." Her words silenced the room, though Al's disdain was far from gone. For their first exercise, Miss Gray explained the 4 categories of matter and demonstrated how magic worked by processing the world's data code. With a wave of her hand, she manifested a bouquet of crystal roses, stunning the class. "These are the fundamentals of magic," she said before erasing them with ease. When a student asked if she had used anti-material code, Gray revealed that such magic was impossible. No one in the world could wield it. She then instructed the class to practice summoning crystal roses. Amelia quickly created a perfect rose, her elegance on full display. Meanwhile, Ray managed to summon nothing but a pathetic ice cube, as useless as Al thought his very existence was. Seeing this, Al swore under his breath, "I'll end that worthless bastard myself." After class, Ray followed the so-called ugly chick into the library, awkwardly apologizing for not introducing himself earlier. "I am also interested in Lydia's antimaterial theories," he said, catching her attention. She introduced herself as Alyssa, revealing that Lydia had been her lifelong idol. When Ray admitted he also loved Lydia from the bottom of his heart, Alyssa's excitement bubbled over, causing her hat to fall off. Embarrassed, she quickly apologized for getting carried away, but Ray noticed her hair for the first time. "Why hide something so beautiful?" he asked. She hesitated before revealing the reason. Her half-elf ears had made her the target of relentless bullying. Ray, however, thought they made her even prettier than Aphrodite herself. Alyssa turned red, flustered by his honesty, and muttered that he was surprisingly mature. Her words struck a chord, bringing back memories of Howard saying the same thing to him once. Later that evening, when Ray returned to his dorm, his roommate was waiting for him, an energetic guy who introduced himself as E.B. Armstrong. "I am not like those other noble morons," E.B. declared. "I believe in only one thing." Intrigued, Ray shook his hand, and the sheer force of their grip made them both realize they were cut from the same cloth. Without a word, they threw off their shirts, proudly revealing their gigachad physiques. Grinning like idiots, they declared their newfound bond as muscle bros. It was the start of an unexpected friendship, built on shared strength and mutual respect. The following morning, Ray was midway through his 30-mile run when the wind from his pace nearly lifted a girl's skirt. Realizing what almost happened, he jogged back to apologize, saying he should have run faster. The girl, surprised by his speed and politeness, introduced herself as Rebecca Bradley. She seemed genuinely impressed, calling his stamina incredible for so early in the morning. Later, while walking to school, E.B. casually mentioned that Rebecca was the daughter of the second-highest royal family. "Be careful around her and Amelia," he warned. On his way to meet the principal, yet another girl crashed into Ray, this one as flat as a surfboard. He couldn't help himself and muttered, "Good thing there was nothing to cushion that collision." Before she could react, he quickly added, "But it's a pleasure to meet such a charming pigtailed lady," turning the moment around. She brightened up, introducing herself as Clarice Cleveland, claiming to be the girl loved by pigtails themselves. Ray, ever the smooth talker, said, "That must be a beautiful family name," despite having no idea who they were. Clarice seemed thrilled by the compliment, assuming they'd become close friends, but abruptly remembered she had somewhere to be and sprinted off. Ray just smiled, amused by how chaotic his day had already become. In the principal's office, Ray bowed deeply to Abby, his former colonel, who was now overseeing the academy. Abby smiled, her stern military demeanor softened as she recalled their time together during the war. "I hope you can enjoy a normal life here," she said, though her eyes betrayed the weight of memories they shared. By the end of the school day, Ray was set to duel Al. As soon as the match began, Ray parried Al's sword with effortless precision, forcing it into the ground and ending the match in an instant. But Al, too stubborn to admit defeat, charged at Ray again. This time, Ray struck back with surgical accuracy, destroying the wooden blade and leaving Al sprawled on the ground. Watching from the sidelines, Abby couldn't help but smile, glad to see that the Ice Blade sorcerer was finally experiencing something close to a normal student life. Later that night, Ray and E.B. were bonding in the most bro way possible, deep-throating their protein shakes like champions. Between gulps, Ray casually mentioned that he wanted to join 2 different clubs. E.B. laughed, calling the idea impossible, but Ray smirked and said he had a secret plan. The scene shifted to the Iron Dungeon, where a group of massive, intimidating men waited for Ray's arrival. As E.B. and the other members watched curiously, the club leader demanded to know why Ray was worthy of joining their environmental research club. The group of men, initially skeptical of Rey, thought he was too scrawny and lacking the bulk they expected. That was until the leader barked at him to strip down. Rey complied, revealing his ripped body and expanding to show off his true bulk. One of the guys, wide-eyed, muttered that Rey's abs were so massive, he probably had to pay property taxes on them. Rey smirked and casually explained that he'd trained in the backwoods, showing off his gold hunter license. As proof that he was one of the strongest, most powerful bulkers alive. Impressed, the leader immediately invited him to join their environmental research club. The men erupted in cheers, realizing their club was more of a mental asylum than anything else. A few minutes later, Rey found himself in a room full of women, and Rebecca was the leader of this particular group. He told her he wanted to join their flower planting club, explaining that, even in the world's deadliest battlefields, he could always find a flower blooming in the chaos. However, the ugliest girl in the room shot him a suspicious look, thinking he was just there to seduce Rebecca. Seeing the skepticism, especially since he was an ordinary, she decided to put him to the test. "Dina will evaluate your worthiness," she declared, leading Rey to the roof for what was bound to be an interesting challenge. Dina revealed that Rey's test was to clean the entire space within a week, wishing him luck as he started his task. On the first day, Rey dug up the weeds to clear the field, with Dina secretly spying on him from a distance. Once the weeds were gone, Rey began mending the ground, working tirelessly while Evie joked that she wished she was the hoe getting plowed by him, and Alyssa, more boldly, wished he would plant his seed in her fertile soil. By the third day, Rey had laid cement in canals to create walls for the different types of flowers. All the hard work was paying off, but Rebecca showed up with a strawberry cream pie, telling him she'd negotiated with the school to have them since she was the student council president. Rey couldn't help but think she was amazing for that, but she couldn't stop staring at his massive arms and asked if she could touch them. When he allowed it, she was in awe, saying they were the biggest and hardest man part she'd ever held. Rey casually explained he'd trained in the backwoods. On the fourth day, the garden was complete, and Dina, though reluctantly, admitted Rey had passed. Rebecca welcomed him to their club, and the entire ordeal ended with a weird mix of admiration and, let's say, more than a little infatuation. The next day in class, Professor Gray announced that their practical exercise would take place in the Kafka forest, and they needed to form parties of 4. Rose immediately grew concerned, wondering if Rey would end up alone. But Rey, remembering Abby's warning about a spy infiltrating their school, couldn't help but wonder what was going on. Just then, Evie piped up, asking to join his party. Rey hesitated, explaining that he wasn't great with sorcery. Evie, unfazed, grinned and said, "That's fine. Your body will make any wand explode." Looking around for a third member, Rey approached Alyssa and asked if she'd join them. She hesitated, calling herself as useless as a toaster. Rey, ever the smooth talker, said, "You're the toaster I need." She laughed and agreed. Just then, Amelia, curious, asked if there was still room in the group. Rey, with a mischievous glint in his eye, said, "I was planning on filling your opening from the start." The room fell silent, the awkward tension palpable, especially for the guy who'd just come back from rehab, who looked like he might choke on his own disbelief. Rey's group was shaping up, and things were about to get interesting. Inside the forest, the teacher, resembling a no-nonsense coach like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, explained the rules of their practical exercise. They needed to reach the center of the forest within 24 hours while collecting as many stamps as possible from the monsters hidden within. With a flare shot into the air, Rey and his group sprinted into the forest, adrenaline pumping. But just a few hours in, a monstrous creature lunged at Alyssa, its claws aiming for her head. Rey, quick as Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, swooped in and saved her at the last second. They quickly got into their battle stances, and Rey, channeling his inner Geralt of Rivia, rushed forward, slashing the beast in half with a single strike, earning the group their first stamp. By the time the night arrived, Amelia, who'd been watching in awe, asked, "Where did you learn all those survival skills and sword techniques? It's like you're some kind of Keanu Reeves in John Wick." She began to wonder if his stories of training in the backwoods were really true. Hearing her words, Rey was momentarily lost in thought, recalling that this forest was paradise compared to the battlefields he had come from. For a moment, he questioned if he was even allowed to enjoy his life, given that so many of his comrades had died. The group noticed his sudden shift in mood, but Rey quickly lied, telling them he was just tired. As night fell and they settled to sleep, Rey stayed awake to keep watch, recalling the words of his late master, reminding him to enjoy a normal life for once. The following morning, as Rey was navigating through the forest, he heard a scream echo in the distance. Without a second thought, he sprang into action, using just 40% of his speed to keep his movements ordinary. As he neared the source of the scream, he discovered an A-rank class monster had ambushed Al and his useless squad, who were already bound and helpless. Ray's instincts kicked in, and as he activated his innate code, he dodged the monster's attacks with reflexes that seemed almost inhuman. In an explosive leap, Ray soared through the air, piercing the beast's brain with a swift strike, killing it instantly. With his blade sheathed, he asked Al if he needed help, only for the worthless bastard to slap his hand away, claiming he had it under control. Ray raised an eyebrow, wondering if Al had learned some secret strategies at his AA meetings. Just then, Ray's group caught up to him, and as he turned to Alyssa, asking if she could free the useless morons, Amelia's eyes widened in disbelief. She had just witnessed Ray take down an A-rank monster with a single strike, and she couldn't help but wonder who he really was. From the shadows, a mysterious spy threw a dagger at the monster's corpse, resurrecting it and evolving it into an S-rank calamity beast. The situation escalated, and Ray knew things were about to get much more complicated. As the calamity beast roared, the cheap prostitutes in the vicinity screamed in terror, but Ray remained undeterred, still determined to kill the creature. At the same time, another group of students was passing by. When Clarice heard the monstrous roar, she peered from behind a tree, her eyes wide with awe. She had never seen a creature this massive before. Just then, Ray charged at the beast, slashing it with all his might, but to his surprise, the monster was unscathed. He wondered how it had evolved after dying. As the creature attacked, Ray managed to block its deadly claws, but when he attempted to unleash his ice powers, a flaming wall suddenly erupted from the ground, forcing the monster to retreat. At Amelia's command, Evie hurled a rock at the beast, and Alyssa propelled it with wind, knocking the monster in the belly. Before it could recover, Ray stabbed it with his sword, holding the blade in place until he sliced it in half, killing it instantly. With the monster dead, the group stood together, deciding to join forces. Seeing them as a team made Ray reflect on his old comrades. Meanwhile, Clarice, still hidden, watched everything unfold, her mind racing as she wondered just how powerful Ray really was. At the same time, the mysterious spy was still observing Ray from the shadows. As he realized just how special Ray was, the spy quietly disappeared without a trace. Within a few hours, Ray's group found the final checkpoint. After taking the stamp, Amelia jumped on top of Alyssa and started grabbing her body, but Evie wondered aloud if Ray was also capable of carrying them, thanks to his backwoods forest training. By the time the contest ended, the instructor announced that Ray's group was the winner. As Clarice cheered them on, she couldn't help but notice the envy in the eyes of the other students, all of whom were stunned to see Ray performing better than any of them. A few days later, Lydia was feeling a strange anxiety, realizing it had been 2 months since she last saw Ray. She quickly fixed herself up as soon as she heard he was coming. When Ray entered, he was greeted by a hot maid named Carla, and Lydia couldn't help but notice that she was the one looking up to him these days. Ray, however, was just glad that Lydia no longer felt the need to kneel in front of him. As they sat down for breakfast, Lydia told him that a powerful group had been abducting sorcery researchers, cutting open their brains to discover hidden sorcery. The gravity of the situation was clear, and Ray knew that trouble was brewing. She explained that the group was called Eugenic and warned Ray that they might try to lure him in, advising him to never release his lock unless his life depended on it. A few hours later, as they walked through the forest, Lydia couldn't help but wonder if Ray had made any new friends. Ray smiled and told her he had made the greatest group of deranged morons. Lydia, amused, told him to invite them over next time, thinking they must be really special to make him smile like that. When they arrived at a tree, Lydia mentioned that the magic sword fighting competition was about to start. She revealed that she had won the event 4 times already and asked Ray if he would consider entering. Ray, however, preferred to stay out of it, choosing instead to hide his powers and cheer on his friends. Lydia then pulled out a book from her massive milkers, explaining that it had been specifically adapted for a student. When Ray called her amazing, she begged him to keep calling her that, moaning in response. The next day, during his morning marathon, Ray sprinted past Alyssa, determined to start the day strong. But as her floodgates opened, he decided to stop and saw all the books inside her back. When he wondered where she was headed, she told him that she intends to visit the library, so having nothing better to do, Ray asked if he could go with her, but her floodgates were destroyed in that instant. So after changing her clothes to hide the stain, Ray thought she was cute and that he was jealous of her heart because it's pumping inside of her while he's not. While inside the library, Ray helped her to pick out a book and she told him that it was written by her favorite sorcery researcher, Dr. Answorth. But as they began to read, Ray discovered that Lydia's book was actually a book of pickup lines, and after leaving the library he tried using some of the lines on Alyssa, but Clarice was spying on them from behind a pillar and wondered why he had abandoned her already. As she began wondering how she would get her man back, Ray appeared before her and asked her to join them for lunch, but when she wondered if he was asking her on a date, the Gigachad said that he was destroying her floodgates as well. While they ate, Ray introduced Alyssa as his pinky toe, because, according to him, he usually bangs her on the coffee table at night. Classy, right? Then he turned to Clarice, describing her as so damn beautiful she looked like a masterpiece, which is why he wanted to nail her, literally, against a wall. Goddamn, Picasso would have approved. They spent the afternoon eating, chatting, and tolerating Ray's dumb jokes. By the end of it, though, the girls had enough and decided to ditch his ugly mug. Just as Ray was about to curse his luck, the best girl, Amelia, appeared out of nowhere, looking like Aphrodite herself. Ray bolted up to her, wondering why she was so dolled up. She sighed and confessed it was because of the endless noble events she had to endure. It's exhausting, she vented, apologizing for spilling her woes. But Ray, ever the smooth talker, told her it was better to get it off her chest, especially when her chest was that heavy and distracting. Damn, even Marilyn Monroe couldn't compete. Amelia's mood shifted when she heard that Clarice and Alyssa had just left. Jealousy flared in her eyes as she demanded Ray accompany her to the mall, leaving him with no choice but to follow her lead like the obedient idiot he was. Inside the store, Amelia was on a mission, trying on outfit after outfit, each one more stunning than the last. Ray, naturally, couldn't resist showering her with compliments, pulling lines straight out of his Discord playbook, even tossing in some awkward English for good measure. "IPR to my heart," he blurted, earning a giggle from her. When she asked why he seemed so comfortable around girls, he shrugged and admitted he'd grown up surrounded by women, so it wasn't something he'd ever overthought. Flustered, she darted back into the dressing room, her mind swirling as she wondered why his arms felt so damn warm. Could she ever trust him enough to reveal her secret? Meanwhile, in the forest, Al was channeling full-on supervillain energy, setting trees ablaze and screaming like a lunatic about how he'd burn Ray's ugly face off the planet. It was like a scene straight out of a bad soap opera, but with fire. The next day, Ray was at the gym, stretching his muscles alongside a group of beefed-up bodybuilders, probably imagining himself as the next Dwayne Johnson. After the session, he made his way to the gardening club, where Dina handed him a spare key, mentioning that the other members had taken the day off, leaving him in charge. Alone in the room, Ray let out a bizarre yes, 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 no, 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 shish, under his breath, as if rehearsing lines for a one-man comedy show. That's when he noticed her, Dina, standing there with an aura that could only be described as grown-up plot armor. Trying to recover, he awkwardly wondered if she liked bunnies, but the moment turned even weirder when she admitted she usually wore this metaphorical armor to hide her vulnerability. Blushing, she begged him to forget what he'd seen, leaving Ray more confused than ever in a world that seemed to thrive on chaos. After arriving on the rooftop, Rebecca eagerly began showing Ray the flowers she wanted to plant, her eyes lighting up with every description. But Ray, sensing something was off, asked if she was upset. She shook her head and gave a bittersweet smile, admitting that she was just relieved to have someone to talk to. None of the other club members would spend time with her because she came from one of the three noble families. It felt isolating, like being stuck on a pedestal no one wanted to climb. That's why she was so glad to have him in their club. He was the only one who treated her like a real person. Meanwhile, Al, in full conspiracy mode, wondered aloud if there was anyone from the third noble family attending Arnold Academy. Rebecca casually revealed that the Allens had only ever attended Diam Academy, and their daughter was gearing up to compete in the Magic Chevalier contest. She added, almost as an afterthought, that this girl was the only one who could rival Amelia's insane skills. The next day, Amelia found herself locked in a duel with some cheap escort who barely knew how to hold a sword. The instructor announced that only the winners of each duel would qualify for the sword fighting contest, which lit a fire in Amelia's already competitive soul. With one swift strike, she sent the poor girl's wooden sword flying, earning herself an easy victory. But instead of basking in the applause, Amelia turned her gaze to Ray and called him out for a duel. The room fell silent as the challenge hung in the air. Ray, to his credit, didn't back down, stepping forward with a confident smirk. As they faced off, the instructor began the match, and for a moment, it felt like the entire academy was holding its breath. Amelia charged forward with relentless speed, her blade flashing like lightning. Ray managed to parry her attacks, but he quickly realized she was faster than him. Too fast. Forced to leap away, he tried to regroup, but Amelia's sharp tongue cut through the tension. "You're a mysterious man," she teased, "and damn good at handling your wood." Her smirk widened as she added, "Maybe I'll feel you slapping me with that sword." Fueled by her taunts, she attacked again, her strikes landing on his blade with every ounce of strength she had. As Howard's rigorous training flickered in Ray's mind, he parried her sword with precision. For a moment, it looked like Head gained the upper hand, and Amelia felt the match slipping away. But then, as Ray's powers surged unexpectedly, his grip faltered. The sword flew from his hands, and he collapsed to his knees, stunned and defenseless. The crowd froze in shock, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. The instructor broke the silence, declaring Amelia the winner, but she wasn't buying it. To her, it felt like Ray had thrown the match intentionally, and as she replayed his last move in her head, she couldn't shake the question, who the hell was this guy? Later that day, as the group sat down for lunch, the atmosphere was lighter but still charged with curiosity. Evie leaned forward, asking how Ray had become so skilled with a sword. He leaned back, a hint of nostalgia crossing his face, and revealed that he once had a master, a woman who had taught him everything, from sorcery to swordsmanship. The table grew quiet, everyone trying to picture the enigmatic figure who had trained him. Just as the conversation was about to continue, Al stormed over, slamming his hand on the table so hard that plates rattled. "Ray," he growled, his voice brimming with challenge, "I am calling you out. A duel. Right now." The group exchanged uneasy glances, the tension mounting once again as Ray locked eyes with Al, the sparks of a new battle already igniting in the air. Before long, the group had gathered outside the forest, where Amelia immediately noticed a shimmering barrier encasing the entire area. She figured Al must have cast it to keep their duel a secret. As Al handed Ray a sword, he smirked and said they could use sorcery if they wanted. Without wasting a moment, Al charged at Ray, his movements aggressive and wild. Ray dived out of the way, drawing his sword with practiced ease. Al, seething with fury, vowed to end him. Suddenly, a menacing purple aura began radiating from Al's body, making the air around him feel heavy and hostile. When Al attacked again, Ray leapt away effortlessly, his calm demeanor only fueling Al's anger further. In a fit of rage, Al summoned a massive fireball, the flames crackling ominously in his hands. "You don't deserve to be here," he snarled, his voice dripping with resentment. The humiliation of his past clawed at him. The useless parents who were mocked for being in the lower echelons of the middle tier, ignored and scorned by every other noble. That humiliation had ignited a burning desire in him to elevate his family's name and become a grand sorcerer. To Al, Ray represented everything wrong, someone unworthy of a spot in Arnold Academy. Consumed by his inner voice screaming for vengeance, Al hurled fireballs with deadly precision. Ray dodged each one with agility, but when he noticed the fireballs veering dangerously close to his friends, his demeanor shifted. In a single, fluid motion, he sliced through the largest fireball, his sword glowing with power as the flames disintegrated into harmless sparks. The crowd stood in stunned silence, their jaws dropping at the sheer impossibility of what they had just witnessed. As Al unleashed a roaring flame that engulfed the battlefield, Ray charged straight through it, his figure cutting through the heat like it was nothing. The so-called ugly loser launched fireballs one after another, but Ray dodged them all with ease, his movements almost mocking Al's efforts. When the final fireball came hurtling toward him, Ray dispersed it effortlessly with a single, calculated strike. Al, watching in disbelief, began to suspect that Ray must be a noble. But Ray's calm response cut deeper than any sword. "I am just an ordinary guy," he said coolly. "You're just too weak." Those words shattered Al's composure, and his rage exploded. With a furious scream, he summoned a massive fireball that morphed into a blazing dragon. The fiery beast roared as it lunged at Ray, but with one swift, precise strike, Ray sliced the flaming dragon in half, dispersing it into harmless embers. The sight left Al broken, his weak, fragile soul crumbling under the weight of his defeat. He collapsed to his knees, screaming at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing through the forest. Ray returned to his friends, and Amelia immediately stepped forward, her eyes burning with curiosity. "It's time you tell us the truth," she demanded. But before Ray could utter a word, a sudden magical force field pinned them all to the ground. Emerging from the shadows of the forest was a figure cloaked in menace. The spy stepped forward, her voice cold and sinister. "You will all serve as living sacrifices," she hissed. As she cast off her veil, Ray's heart sank. Standing before him was Miss Gray. Her intentions were clear, her allegiance even clearer. She belonged to the eugenics, a group steeped in darkness. But Ray, unshaken by the revelation, rose to his feet, his resolve firm. "I'll protect my friends," he declared, his voice filled with unwavering determination. Slowly, He began to approach her, his sword gleaming with the promise of defiance, ready to face whatever darkness awaited him. Just then, Miss Grey's expression darkened as she revealed her sorcerer's eye, the crimson glow in her gaze making Ray's stomach churn. In an instant, he realized she was the one responsible for evolving the monster in Kafka Forest. Smirking, she taunted him, declaring that she had already cast a barrier over the area. "It's perfect," she sneered. "The greatest minds in the academy, all in one place. Their brains will make ideal sacrifices for the eugenics." Ray tightened his grip on his sword, pointing it at her with unwavering determination. But before he could act, Miss Grey leapt back, summoning a swarm of writhing fire snakes. The flaming serpents lunged at him with terrifying speed, but Ray dodged them effortlessly, his movements sharp and precise. As Ray charged toward her, Miss Grey's expression shifted into a wicked grin. Changing her strategy, she directed the flames toward his friends instead. Time seemed to slow as Ray's mind raced. Lydia's words echoed in his head, "You'll need to know when to make the call." Determined to act, Ray released Cronus Lock, unleashing a sudden wave of power. A massive wall of ice erupted in front of him, repelling the flames and shielding his friends. The air grew frigid as a cold aura began emanating from his body, sending shivers through everyone present. Apologizing quietly to his master, he stretched out his hand, summoning a flurry of razor-sharp icicle blades. The sight of the blades left Miss Grey momentarily stunned. "Impossible," she gasped. The ice blade sorcerer vanished after the war, but Ray stepped forward, his gaze icy and resolute. "That title was passed on to me," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the frozen air like a blade. Miss Grey's shock morphed into desperation as she prepared to end him by any means necessary. Miss Grey hurled a massive fireball at Ray, its heat searing through the air, but with a single strike of his sword, he dispersed it effortlessly, the flames vanishing like smoke. Frustrated and desperate, she decided to unleash her ultimate attack, Causality Draco. The air around them distorted as she summoned the devastating spell, but Ray calmly activated anti-material code, dispelling it instantly. Grey froze, her confidence faltering. "That can't be," she stammered. "Anti-material code doesn't exist." But Ray continued advancing, his gaze colder than the frost lingering in the air. "You're about to learn just how real it is," he said, his voice as sharp as his blade. Terrified, Miss Grey launched a barrage of fireballs in rapid succession, but each one disintegrated before even touching him. Panicking, she turned to flee, but Ray, unrelenting, cast his swords toward her. One pierced her ankle, sending her crashing to the ground with a scream. She writhed in pain, her fear palpable as she started begging for her life. Ray hesitated, his sword lowered slightly as he considered sparing her. But in that moment of mercy, she made her move. Flames erupted violently from the ground, engulfing him in a fiery explosion. When the smoke cleared, Ray emerged unscathed, his icy aura undiminished. Grey stared at him in horror, her mind racing. "He's not human. He's a monster." Desperate and cornered, she ripped off her necklace, revealing a hidden syringe. As she held it to her temple, her eyes gleamed with a maniacal determination. "You'll see," she said with a twisted smile. "This is the power I've awakened from a lifetime of research and sorcery." Without hesitation, she drove the syringe into her brain. Her body convulsed violently as dark energy engulfed her. In seconds, she began transforming into a grotesque monster, her form twisting and mutating as the dark energy consumed her. Her laughter turned to a guttural roar, echoing through the forest. At that moment, the barrier dissolved, and the spell restraining the others vanished. As Ray and Miss Grey clashed, he managed to knock her down again, but she surrounded him with flames. Without hesitation, Ray dispersed them instantly, summoning his icicle blades once more. Miss Grey grew furious, unable to land a single hit. "Why can't I touch you?" she demanded. Ray replied coldly, "Because my power comes from within." When she launched a massive fireball, Ray slowed it down with deceleration and used lock registration to make it disappear. "My ice sorcery uses celeration," he said, "and with anti-material code, I can reverse code theory and return your attacks to prima material. That's the essence of ice blade sorcery." Raising his sword, he activated material shift, striking with precision. In desperation, Miss Grey awakened mind infiltration sorcery, but Ray cut through it effortlessly, launching icicle blades that tore the dark magic apart. She could do nothing but watch as his power overwhelmed her. At that moment, Ray's powers began to overheat, and ice spread rapidly across his body. Despite the strain, he managed to repel Miss Grey's relentless attacks. Realizing he was losing control of his powers, she saw an opportunity to annihilate him. In her next strike, she destroyed his blade, confident that the battle was over. But Ray, undeterred, activated ice bloom profusion, transforming the scattered ice particles into a freezing tornado that trapped her inside a frozen cone. Exhausted, Ray collapsed to his knees, using Cronus Lock to seal his overwhelming power as he decelerated it. Just then, he saw his friends running toward him. Relieved that he had managed to protect them, he passed out. In his unconscious state, a memory surfaced of Howard walking away, telling him to keep living and promising to watch over him from heaven. Moments later, Ray regained consciousness, finding Lydia at his side. Thinking she would be disappointed, he apologized softly for releasing Cronus Lock. However, Lydia surprised Ray by telling him she was proud of him for using his powers to protect his friends. She believed that one day, he would fully recover from the war and no longer need to activate Cronus Lock. When Ray realized his friends were nowhere in sight, he panicked, wondering if they had been attacked while he was unconscious. Abby reassured him that they were merely recovering from magical energy deficiency. As Lydia prepared to leave, Carla subtly revealed that Lydia had been deeply worried about him. Once they were gone, Abby stayed behind to talk. She confessed that she initially didn't want to admit Ray to the academy, believing he needed time to recover from his traumatic past. But Lydia had begged her, insisting he needed to experience a normal life. Abby then revealed that Lydia's final wish for Ray was to enjoy his school life and find his own happiness. Overwhelmed by emotion, Lydia had even cried tears of joy knowing Ray was still alive. After Abby left, Ray's friends visited him in his room. He decided to come clean, apologizing for hiding his secret. "I am one of the 7 Grand Sorcerers," he admitted, the Ice Blade Sorcerer. In the final battle, Ray had overheated by losing control of his engram, completely freezing the battlefield. By the time he woke, everything around him had turned into a desolate wasteland. Lydia had managed to stop him from consuming his own life, binding his power with Cronus Lock to prevent future overheating. As Ray explained this, his friends realized his magic only seemed weak because it was sealed away. Despite this, Ray felt overwhelming guilt for hiding his blood-soaked past and deceiving them. He admitted that his hands were stained with blood from the war and wondered if he even deserved to be near them. As he apologized, Amelia held his hand, her voice steady. "I want you here," she said. "No matter what happened in your past, I believe in the kind person you are now." Evie grinned, adding, "You're amazing, Ray. You're my muscle daddy, and nothing from your past will ever change that." Alyssa smiled warmly, saying she wanted to be his friend forever, while Clarice dismissed his guilt with a shrug. "There's no point in worrying about any of this," she said. Together, they made it clear that Ray's past didn't define him in their eyes. It was who he was now that mattered. Since they would always be friends, Amelia hugged Ray tightly, promising never to leave his side and assuring him he would never be alone. In that moment, memories of Ray's fallen comrades returned, filling him with gratitude. He thanked his friends sincerely for staying by his side. Later that night, while the room was quiet, Al sneaked in, only to find Ray already awake, waiting for him. When Ray asked why he was there, Al admitted he came to apologize for his past actions, acknowledging the things he had done could never be undone. Ray, however, forgave him without hesitation, calling it admirable that Al recognized his mistakes and was sincere in his apology. Moved by Ray's words, Al realized that harboring hatred had only held him back and that true strength came from accepting others for who they were. Meanwhile, Amelia, lying awake, wrestled with her insecurities. She felt like a bird in a cage, unable to compare to Ray's greatness, even questioning whether her appeal mattered to him. "Maybe he's into flat boards," she muttered to herself. The next morning, Abby revealed that Miss Gray was gone, and their new teacher arrived. With a dazzling entrance, Caroline, the hottest girl in all of anime, introduced herself to the class, leaving everyone speechless. Ray felt like he was trapped in a nightmare when Caroline, their new teacher, introduced herself with an over-the-top flair. Carol, thrilled to work with them, began explaining the upcoming magic sword fighting tournament. She revealed that, as reigning champions, their academy would be allowed to enter 6 students instead of the usual 5. Winking at Ray, she added that she was counting on them. Unfortunately for Ray, the wink left him feeling overwhelmed, and not in a good way. After class, Ray stormed into Abby's office, demanding that Carol be fired. "She's the only woman I can't handle," he declared. "She doesn't just make my anger explode, she makes other things explode too." To his horror, when Carol entered the office and casually rubbed his back, he nearly lost control again and darted into a corner to compose himself. The next day, the tournament began. Amelia swiftly defeated her opponent in seconds, but as she walked off the field, Ray noticed her quiet disappointment. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was bothering her. a worry that had likely been building for days. Amelia's father had reminded her of her duties as the eldest daughter of the leader of the three great houses. She was expected to win the sword fighting contest and defeat her greatest rival, Arianne. The pressure of living up to those expectations made Amelia deeply anxious. When Rebecca mentioned that Arianne had been chosen as a representative for her school, Ray realized she must be exceptional with a sword. The following day, after Amelia easily defeated another opponent, the instructor announced that she had won all her matches and secured a spot in the Magic Chevalier contest. Her friends were thrilled at the news and soon learned that Al had qualified as the runner-up. However, as Amelia left the arena, she couldn't shake the fear of disappointing her father if she lost. Ray sensed something was wrong. While Evie's hot body snored blissfully, Ray stayed awake all night, thinking about Lydia's advice from her book. At sunrise, he found Amelia and congratulated her for making it to the qualifiers. But even as he spoke, he could see the doubt in her eyes. She was questioning if she was truly enough for the battle ahead. With the tournament only a month away, Ray offered to train Amelia, revealing a special book as the foundation for their training. Excited to train like Ray, Amelia eagerly accepted. He warned her, though, that the training would push her limits, and only if she survived until the end would she become stronger. That night, Amelia dreamed of the day she first met Arianne. She remembered running away with her to the balcony, where they shared food and laughter. Over the years, they became inseparable, their bond growing stronger with every moment they spent together. During one sunset, Amelia had thanked Arianne for always playing with her, but Arianne insisted that she was the lucky one to have Amelia by her side. Hugging her tightly, Arianne made Amelia promise they would stay friends forever. But everything changed the day of their mock battle. Amelia launched forward with determination, but Arianne dodged her attack and parried her sword with ease. When Arianne extended a hand to help her up, Amelia stood without taking it and walked away in silence, never speaking to her again. Over time, the pressure and expectations of being a noble began to consume her, distancing her from the person she once was. Amelia believed that to survive, she had to win. The next morning, Ray arrived dramatically, wearing a rip-off Power Ranger mask and introducing himself as Master White. He declared himself her new instructor and insisted she call him her ranger. For their first drill, he commanded her to run the length of the Kafka forest without using any body enhancement sorcery, relying solely on her physical strength. By the time they finished, Amelia was utterly exhausted, but Ray dismissed it as an easy first day and warned her that the training would only get tougher. That day, Amelia dozed off at her desk, completely drained. When Evie asked what had happened to her, Alyssa explained it was all part of Ray's training. He had her doing pull-ups with weights strapped to her legs and push-ups with stones tied to her back. One exercise even involved pushing a boulder up a mountain, which nearly made Amelia question her life choices. By the end of the day, she was completely spent, realizing just how grueling Ray's methods could be. That night, Amelia found herself lost in a strange dream. She imagined Arianne running away from her, only to stumble and fall. Suddenly, Alyssa appeared, scooping her up and shoving her into her massive cannons. From her right, Clarice held her hand, dressed in a bunny girl outfit. Just as things grew more surreal, Ray sprinted toward her, shouting her name. She woke with a jolt to the sound of deranged banging outside her window. Looking out, she saw Ray yelling, "I didn't get no sleep cause of y'all. You ain't getting no sleep cause of me." As she fell back onto her bed in disbelief, Rebecca and Dina appeared outside with Ray. Dina sneered, asking why his disgusting face was hanging around the girls' dorm like some homeless crackhead. Ray defended himself, revealing he was performing the Answorth-style wake-up call to summon Amelia. Just then, he spotted her trying to sneak away and took off after her. Though she managed to escape, Ray began scanning the area, determined to find her. Spotting Al nearby, he asked where his ugly squad of losers might be hiding. Al, barely holding it together, muttered something about fighting withdrawals, leaving Ray even more frustrated. Deciding he wasn't getting answers, Ray resolved to scan the entire school. Eventually, Ray discovered Amelia's hiding spot. Meanwhile, she was crouched under a desk, already sick of the grueling training. Sneaking up on her, Ray smugly announced that he had activated his powers just to find her. Amelia hastily claimed she was meditating, but her excuse didn't fool him. Dragging her out of hiding, Ray declared it was time to restart the training, leaving Amelia resigned to her fate, knowing she was definitely screwed. That night, Ray approached the Environmental Science Club, requesting they become Amelia's cheer squad. With their impressive bulk, he believed they could be the loudest cheerleaders possible. Hearing this, Evie remarked that they had finally found a socially acceptable way to scream like maniacs. The next morning, Evie woke up to the sound of someone closing his door but decided against investigating. Meanwhile, Amelia, now motivated, began running on her own. Alyssa proudly told her she'd broken her previous record. As a random girl passed by, praising Amelia's efforts, they wondered who she was. Meanwhile, Ray, observing from afar, was relieved that Head managed to stay unnoticed, silently hoping his plans were falling into place. Later that day, Ray sneaked into Diem Academy, hiding inside a cardboard box. When he noticed a crying girl nearby, he saw an opportunity. Hopping out of the box, he asked why she was upset. The girl tearfully explained that she couldn't find her sister. Seizing the chance, Ray introduced himself as Lily and offered to help her. The girl introduced herself as Tiana Alren, and Ray immediately realized she was Ariane's sister. As they walked through the school, students began whispering about the hot chick, clearly suspicious of Ray's disguise. Eventually, Tiana spotted her sister sitting in a shed. When they approached, Ariane thanked Ray, still believing him to be Lily, for leading Tiana to her. However, Ariane quickly grew suspicious, realizing Lily wasn't a student at Diem Academy. She demanded to know who Ray really was. Dropping the act, Ray admitted he was from Arnold Academy. Ariane, confused but intrigued, began questioning how he managed to alter his voice and even his muscular structure to pull off such a disguise. Ray explained that he altered his appearance using inside code and sorcery. Ariane immediately recognized the rumors about him and suspected he must be the ordinary everyone whispered about. When she asked how she could repay him for helping her sister, Ray challenged her to a friendly duel. Minutes later, they faced off in a simulation battle, and Ray hoped to uncover her full abilities. Ariane rushed at him, aiming to disarm his wooden sword. Her speed and precision impressed Ray, especially as she executed a graceful spin and clashed blades with him again. Feigning to pick up an item, she suddenly unleashed lightning toward the sky, sending Ray's broken sword flying. Acknowledging her skill, Ray admitted she was strong. As they left the courtyard, Ariane asked if he would be entering the tournament. He told her he wasn't but confidently stated that Amelia would defeat her at the competition. On his way back to Arnold Academy, Ray spotted a striking white-haired girl running away. As she tripped and fell, he dashed forward, catching her just in time to save her from hitting the ground. In that moment, the girl thought she had fallen in love. As Ray helped her to her feet, he told her to be careful. "Roses are red, your hair is white," he said with a smirk, "but don't make me think about bending you over tonight." Flustered, the girl asked for his name before he could leave. Ray introduced himself as Lily, and she revealed her name was Maria Bradley. Realizing she might be Rebecca's sister, Ray pieced things together as Maria confessed that she was now certain about attending their school. She begged him to wait until next year before dashing off like she was auditioning for a Twilight remake. Meanwhile, back at Arnold Academy, Amelia was utterly spent after another grueling day of training. Ray suddenly appeared on the wall, congratulating her, sounding like a mashup of Master Roshi and Tony Stark. The girls, however, noticed a figure nearby who seemed to be speaking in Ray's voice. When they asked why, he revealed that it was actually him in disguise. The shock hit like an Avengers plot twist, leaving the girls speechless. A few days later, the group visited Lydia's home. When Lydia teasingly wondered if Ray had grown taller, he smirked and shot back, "Worry about your weak and worthless legs, not my stature." As Ray introduced his friends, Lydia was delighted to meet them. Alyssa, in particular, was ecstatic to discover that Lydia was her favorite sorcery researcher and eagerly asked for her autograph, which Lydia happily signed. While Lydia pulled Amelia aside for a private conversation, Carla invited Ray into the kitchen. There, she revealed a grave concern. Another secretive group, the Grim Reapers, was plotting an attack. She suspected it would happen during the sword fighting tournament. Ray promised her he would keep a close watch over his friends. Meanwhile, in the private room, Lydia gently asked Amelia what was troubling her. She mentioned that Ray had been deeply worried about her and had sent her countless letters asking how he could make her happy. Lydia confessed she could sense Amelia was hiding her talent. She also reflected on her time with Ray, admitting that while she had taught him everything she knew about sorcery, she could never teach him about the human heart. "When we found him, he was just a broken child," she said. "Soldiers were the only thing he'd ever known. But now, for the first time, he has real friends around him, and that means the world to him." Lydia told Amelia that Ray was genuinely worried about her and that if she really wanted to change her life, she needed to start trusting her friends, especially him. "Ray might be a weirdo," she added, "but you can trust him." Once their talk was over, Lydia turned to the group and ordered them to change into swimsuits because they were going swimming. That night, Evie thanked Ray for the chance to meet his master, but Ray silently cursed his luck when Abby showed up with Carol in tow. Despite Ray's irritation, Evie declared it the greatest climax of his life. With all the girls at the pool, chaos unfolded. Clarice seethed with jealousy over Alyssa's massive cannons, but the real disaster was Carol, who arrived completely wasted. Naturally, she activated a spell that made everyone's swimsuits vanish, leaving Ray wondering if he had wandered into a Game of Thrones outtake. The next day, Amelia began her running drills, and Ray couldn't help but notice her improvement. Afterward, they headed into the forest, where he stood before her with a rose pinned to his chest. Drawing his sword, he told her to cut the rose off. Amelia hesitated, doubt flickering in her eyes. Ray smirked, leaning in just enough to make her uncomfortable. "I believe in your strength," he said. Gathering her courage, Amelia finally drew her sword and charged at him, determination blazing in her eyes. A few days later, as the sword fighting tournament was about to begin, Abby officially announced the start. Inside the arena tunnel, Arianne appeared before Amelia, offering her hand with a confident smirk. "I'll be waiting for you in the finals," she said. Amelia hesitated, wondering if she could truly defeat her rival, but shook her hand anyway. In the semifinal, Amelia faced off against a weak, ugly loser. Abby explained that victory required either knocking out the opponent or destroying the rose on their chest. As the match began, the loser charged at Amelia with a wild swing, but she gracefully jumped to the other side. When he lunged again, a small flame erupted from the ground, incinerating his rosé. Abby declared Amelia the winner. Earlier, Amelia had buried an activated sorcery skill beneath the battlefield, timing it perfectly to bait her opponent into defeat. Meanwhile, Ray left the arena and ran into Al in a nearby room. Handing him a rose, Ray told him it was his turn. Al headed to the arena floor, knowing his opponent was none other than Arianne. At Abby's command, the match began, and Al and Arianne charged at each other, their swords clashing fiercely, sending him crashing hard to the ground. Standing over him, she urged him to surrender, but as her words echoed in his ears, Al remembered Ray's advice. Admitting weakness is the first step to becoming stronger. Gritting his teeth, he stood and declared he would never give up. Charging at her again, Al managed to disarm Arianne, sending her sword flying. For a moment, he thought victory was within reach. But Arianne smirked and unleashed her sorcery, capturing his blade mid-strike. While Al stood frozen in shock, she snapped his sword in half and delivered a devastating blow that sent him flying off the podium. As Arianne was declared the winner, Al lay on the ground, dazed but oddly captivated by the beauty of the sky. Meanwhile, Amelia watched from the stands, her nerves twisting as she wondered how she could possibly defeat Arianne. Elsewhere, Ray was patrolling the arena tunnels when a ghostly shadow tried to sneak up on him, only to vanish mysteriously. Moments later, the environmental club captain, Lex, emerged from the darkness. Leading Ray into a private meeting, Lex revealed that a group of ladies had been waiting for him. When Ray noticed the masked men surrounding the group, he immediately wondered who they were. Carla revealed that they belonged to the Hale family, whose bloodline was responsible for the kingdom's intelligence agency. To Ray's surprise, Carla also mentioned that Lex was her brother. Abby then dropped a bombshell. The Grim Reapers had infiltrated the tournament, planning to abduct the daughters of top noble houses. She warned Ray to stay vigilant, and Lex promised to offer support when the enemies appeared. That night, as Ray gazed out the window, he realized he needed to protect Amelia from the looming danger and vowed to stop the Grim Reapers from interfering with the tournament. Meanwhile, Amelia sat alone in her room, consumed by self-doubt and fear that she couldn't defeat Arianne. The next day, as Alyssa and Clarice arrived at the arena, they revealed that Amelia was too terrified to show up. Both of them worried she was starting to lose faith in herself. At that moment, the crowd erupted in whispers as a contestant won his duel in just 2 seconds, breaking the record for the fastest victory in tournament history. As the mysterious fighter began to leave the arena, he paused, locking eyes with Ray. The entire arena fell silent, and Ray instantly realized this was no ordinary student. That night, while Arianne was training, she delivered a series of devastating blows to a punching bag, her final punch causing the floorboards to crack and explode. Her father appeared, watching her with approval. "Proud to see you beating up a defenseless bag," he said smugly, "but I hope you'll kick Amelia just as hard." Arianne replied with unwavering confidence, "I will." Meanwhile, Ray was sparring in his underwear with Evie because, as Evie put it, "we're straight." But Evie noticed Ray seemed distracted. When pressed, Ray admitted he needed to see Amelia. Encouraging him to stop overthinking, Evie sent him on his way. At the girls' dormitory, Ray announced his arrival and asked Amelia to listen to him. "When I first met you, I was afraid of drawing closer to your heart," he confessed. "So I kept running from it. But now, I want to know what you've been burying deep inside. I am ready to reach out and touch your heart." As Ray spoke those words, Amelia opened her door, letting him in. Sitting in her room, she began pouring out her feelings, calling herself hopeless. She admitted that her entire life had been spent trying to meet everyone's expectations. No matter how hard she tried, she felt like it was all worthless compared to Ray's achievements. But Ray shook his head and told her there was no point in comparing their pasts. "I know how hard you're trying," he said. Even so, Amelia confessed that she believed her only chance of becoming someone was to win her duel. "There's no way I can beat Ariane," she whispered. "No matter how much time passes, it'll never catch up to her." When she asked what the meaning of her life was, Ray's response was simple yet profound. "Being alive has no inherent meaning," he said, grabbing her hands firmly. "But our reason to live is something we create, together." He spoke of sharing happiness and sorrow, crying and laughing with friends, and how those connections gave life its meaning. Finally, Ray got down on one knee, looking her in the eyes. "Amelia," he said softly, "I want to spend my entire life with you." All through the night, Amelia held Ray's hand, refusing to let him leave. He stayed by her side, recalling their sparring session in the forest. He remembered how, in desperation, she had awakened her butterfly sorcery, burning his rose instantly and shattering his mask. That moment convinced Ray of her potential. She could defeat anyone if she believed in herself. He told her as much, reaffirming his faith in her. The next day, as Ray arrived at the arena, Alyssa asked if Amelia had recovered. When he casually admitted that she had, and that he had spent the entire night in her room, Alyssa and the others immediately jumped to conclusions about their plot development. Heading into the tunnel, Evie smirked, muttering that Ray had become a real man but secretly wishing he could have been the one to feel that muscular, veiny arm. Before long, Ray found Amelia in a room, and she hugged him tightly for good luck. As she stepped into the arena, Lex appeared behind Ray, delivering grim news. 8 students had been abducted, and Clarice was among them. Determined, Ray told Lex he would search the underground and headed off without hesitation. At the same time, Amelia and Ariane faced off in the arena. Ariane, confident in her superiority, taunted Amelia to surrender, but Amelia vowed to defeat her. Smirking, Ariane unleashed her lightning sorcery, flinging her sword like a bolt of electricity. The blade surged toward Amelia, but in a flash, she teleported behind Ariane and landed a punch that sent her flying across the podium. Ariane quickly recovered and dashed toward Amelia, landing a brutal blow that nearly knocked her off the edge. As Ariane leapt to deliver the finishing strike, Amelia awakened her butterfly sorcery. The resulting explosion overwhelmed Ariane, forcing her to retreat, though she managed to escape with only minor injuries. Amelia, her resolve unshaken, declared, "I will never lose to you." Meanwhile, Ray was sprinting through the underground tunnels. Spotting the abducted students, he rushed to Clarice and began waking her. But before they could move, they noticed an interference barrier forming around them. Realizing it was the Grim Reaper's doing, Ray told Clarice they were being trapped. As enemies closed in, Ray hoisted Clarice onto his shoulder and began running. With no time to lose, he activated Cronus Lock and summoned his icicle blades, preparing for the inevitable fight ahead. As Ray fought off the enemies, Clarice, still dazed, thought the chaos felt like a wild roller coaster ride. Suddenly, the enemies snapped their fingers, shrouding the area in darkness. Ray immediately cast an anti-material field, obliterating their spell and even canceling Amelia's butterfly sorcery above ground. When the enemies attempted to flee, Ray stabbed the ground, summoning ice that froze them in place. As Lex arrived, Ray assured him the enemies weren't dead before dashing toward the arena floor. Meanwhile, Amelia and Ariane were nearing their limits, both visibly exhausted. Ariane smirked and announced she was ready to reveal her greatest sorcery. Realizing Ariane's power had surged, Amelia unleashed her butterflies, but Ariane effortlessly dodged them. In an instant, Ariane flashed behind Amelia, delivering a blow that knocked her away. Amelia managed to regain her balance, but Ariane moved like lightning, dodging every butterfly and landing a devastating hit that sent Amelia soaring 25 feet into the air. The audience gasped in shock, but even after hitting the ground, Amelia refused to surrender. She struggled, determined to rise once more. Every bone in Amelia's body felt weak, and she thought she was on the verge of defeat. But then, memories of her friends and Ray's promise to always stay by her side flashed through her mind. Summoning her resolve, she looked at Ariane and declared, "You'll never reach me again." Activating her butterfly effect, Amelia vanished just as Ariane flashed toward her, causing Ariane to stumble as she narrowly avoided falling off the podium. Regaining her balance, Ariane spotted Amelia and launched another attack, but her strike was effortlessly repelled. "You can't touch me," Amelia said confidently. Watching from the sidelines, Ray realized the truth. Amelia's sorcery was concept interference, an extremely rare technique awakened in less than 0.001% of humans. By manipulating causality, Amelia could override Ariane's attacks before they even happened, making her invincible to physical strikes. Ariane, visibly fatigued, was urged by Amelia to surrender, but she refused and launched another desperate attack. This time, Amelia reactivated her butterfly effect, parrying Ariane's body with precision. As a butterfly exploded in front of Ariane's eyes, the crowd erupted in stunned silence. At that moment, Amelia noticed blood dripping from her nose, her body beginning to falter under the strain of her sorcery. Ray, watching from the sidelines, realized she was starting to overheat. But Amelia, fueled by sheer determination, refused to lose. Ariane, equally resolved, declared she wouldn't be defeated either. The two charged at each other with everything they had. As another butterfly exploded, Ariane managed to land a powerful kick, but Amelia retaliated with an attempt to burn her face off, only for Ariane to shield the attack. Trading blows and mirroring each other's ferocity, they eventually collided in a headbutt, both barely able to stand by the end. When Ariane regained consciousness, she realized Amelia had won. Despite her exhaustion, Amelia was simply relieved to see Ariane alive. "You've grown stronger," Ariane admitted, her voice tinged with respect. Amelia replied humbly, "I only managed to improve because I was desperate to reach your level." Ariane then confessed her own struggles, revealing that she had strived to become the perfect aristocrat, hoping to lead by example for her lifelong friend. In that moment, Amelia understood, Ariane had been struggling just as much, all for her sake.